Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the Railway. Bit of a bonus video for you today, not something I normally do. Obviously I'm sat here looking a bit like a pompous newsreader at the moment, but that's kind of the idea. It's just a comfortable place to sit, and I thought I would try this as a video idea just for a change. It's a bit of a sort of model news series, if you like. I'm just going to discuss things basically, so if you want to see trains running, if you want exciting races and things, this probably isn't the place for you to come, but I thought this would just be a nice way to discuss changes in the hobby, new models coming out, that sort of thing. And there's been quite an interesting one that I wanted to talk about right now. So Hornby recently have released, well, they haven't released it actually, they've just announced a wagon that's going to look a little bit like this, that is going to have Tts Sound on board. And I actually was quite impressed by the idea, actually. There's a lot, ooh, let's not have it roll away. There's a lot about the wagon that is looking promising, but there's a lot as well that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I just thought I would want to talk about it today. Now, first of all, obviously this is not a criticism of Hornby or anybody else, because obviously it has only been announced. It is still in the early stages, and Hornby have even said on their blog that everything about it is subject to change, so you can't take anything as golden just yet, and certainly it's not due to be released until I believe January of next year, so it's probably not even gone into production yet. Everything is subject to change, so a lot of this conversation is just going to be based on speculation and on the information that Hornby have given us already. So as you know, Hornby are treading on pretty thin ice at the moment. As you know, they've lost the Thomas licence, well, they've given it up, and yeah, they've not been doing well financially at the moment, so it's really important that they don't drop the ball. And it is kind of incumbent upon us to support them. I mean, obviously, regardless of whether you like Hornby or whether you don't, if Hornby were to go away, it would change the hobby drastically for the worst. So, you know, yeah, even I would admit that Hornby have made decisions that have annoyed me in the past. But regardless of that, you know, if push came to shove, I would definitely stand up to the mark and support them. And like I say, it's kind of incumbent on all of us to try and do that, to try and, you know, support them and try and keep them going. And before I get started, the last thing I wanted to say as well is that I'm obviously no expert. I certainly don't have access to all of the research that Hornby have obviously done before deciding to produce a product like this. I'm not an expert in the market, but what I can say is that I have made a bit of a career out of the model railways industry. I do quite a lot of evaluations of different models and things, and people seem to like what I do. And also I do own a lot of models, so I can sort of say that I know what I'm talking about in the loosest possible sense. But also, for the most part, I'm a customer, you know, as somebody on the outside looking in, so I don't know if anybody from Hornby's watching this. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know, but in a way I wish they would, and it's a good job that this model is still in the development phase, because it means that things can still be changed. So bear with me on this, it's going to be a bit of a ramble, it might not make a lot of sense, hopefully it will. There's going to be a lot of cuts and things because I want to try and get my point across coherently, and that's not always easy to do in one take, so I'll do my best, but anyway, so here we go. So obviously Tts Sound then, I've got a couple of Tts logos. I don't know what the Class 71's doing now, that's not Tts. But I thought, obviously most of us know what Tts Sound is, but for those who don't, I thought I would briefly explain it so that we're all on the same page. And it's also important to understand the advantages of Tts Sound and its strengths. So Tts is a brilliant system. It's owned by Hornby. It's a kind of digital decoder. It's basically a pretty standard digital decoder, except rather than just being able to control your locomotives on a DCC controller, with these decoders they have a speaker on them and you can control the sounds. And in a relatively loose way, the sounds are synchronized to the movement of the locomotive, you know, chuffing on steam locos, you've got sort of, I don't know, engines spinning up and things on diesels, that kind of thing. In a loose way, it is synchronized, and it's actually very, very affordable. Normally, to buy a DCC sound decoder, it's going to cost you over £100, but these decoders go for between £30 and £40 on their own, which is really, really, really good. I mean, for years you would have to pay much more for that, so that's a massive advantage. But other advantages of it, of course, is that the sound will move with the loco. So you've got the decoder and the speaker inside the tender of a TTS loco. As it moves around the layout, the sound is synchronized to the loco and it moves around with it, right? So that's obviously a big advantage. And the other advantage, of course, is that you're never going to be able to build something like this at home unless you're an absolute electronics wizard. There's no way that you're going to be able to produce a decoder that can, you know, generate fairly realistic sounds for less than £40. It's probably not going to happen, and certainly those that are able to do something like that are in the minority, and it's certainly not me. So in a nutshell, they're cheap, they do what they say on the tin, and it's certainly not something you're going to be able to do at home. So this wagon, well, this isn't it, by the way. It hasn't been released yet. This is just a wagon that looks a bit like it, but we're going to pretend it's this because I think this is the model they're going to be using, or if not, something quite similar. So it's the same principle with the wagon. It's going to have presumably a TTS decoder inside it and a speaker and whatnot, and it's going to make noises. And of course, that's a good idea. Obviously, it is a little bit weird sounding because unlike a steam locomotive or a diesel, wagons aren't particularly vocal. But if you think about it, obviously they do make a degree of noise in real life. If you've ever seen them at heritage railways, of course, you've got the couplers clanking, you can hear the wheels going over the rail joins. So yeah, okay, a little bit of ambient noise from a wagon would actually be a really, really good idea. But recently Hornby released some audio samples of what might be heard on the wagon, and those were quite weird. In fact, I'll play you a few seconds of it right now. So obviously those sounds are subject to change, but what struck me as odd is the fact that there is no coupler noises or sounds of the wheels or rattling or anything like that. It's all sort of farmyard noises and industry noises and crowds and that sort of thing, which is fine, and obviously there will be a gap in the market for ambient audio on a layout, but having it come from a wagon strikes me as being a little bit weird, to be honest with you. And in the blog, Hornby have, I think it does briefly mention coupling sound effects and that sort of thing, but clearly based on those samples, that isn't going to be the focus, which again is a little bit strange to me. Now, as I was saying earlier, one of the massive advantages to having TTS sound is that the sound is anchored to the locomotive normally. So for example, the steam locomotive makes chuffing sounds, right, and those sounds are anchored to the locomotive itself. It makes sense. I don't understand why you would want to anchor farmyard sound effects to a wagon like this. If you don't have a wagon going around going eh or whatever, the industry, you don't have 100 people inside there chattering. And it is obvious where the sound's coming from because, when you activate the sound on a TTS loco, it's immediately, you see where the sound's coming from and you think, wow, that locomotive is alive. I don't really understand why you would need to anchor that sound to a wagon necessarily. And obviously the idea with this is that you're going to park it in a station or something, or maybe in a goods yard, and it's obscure, it's hidden in plain sight, if you like. And yeah, I suppose in that case it would make sense, but the temptation for me would certainly be to run it around on the layout and have it make noises. And so the bulk of the sound effects on here, if those samples or anything to go by, are not going to be all that useful. And certainly if it's making horse noises while it's moving around the layout, that isn't going to make a lot of sense. So okay, ambient sound is definitely something we need in the model railway industry, but I think that's very different to a wagon that makes noises itself. I think there's a big difference there. So I don't understand why you'd want the bulk of those sound effects anchored to the wagon. Like I've already said a million times, coupling sound effects, rattling, clanking, whatever, is fine, and I understand that, and I assume that would be all it was. But okay, let's go with it. So let's say that we want to buy a TTS wagon for ambient sound. Now, TTS isn't necessarily, in my opinion, the best way to do this. The sound quality on them is okay. I mean, you've heard them in my videos. I'll show you clips and things if you like. The sound quality's alright, but it's not what you'd call convincing. It's a little bit gimmicky, perhaps a little bit more than just a gimmick, but it's certainly not what you'd call convincing, let's say. Also with TTS, obviously, you're pretty much stuck with the sounds on the chip. The steam locomotive sounds, I don't believe it's possible to change them. You can't, for example, upload your own audio samples or whatever onto the decoder. As far as I know, it's certainly not made easy to do. Whether it is actually possible with a little bit of hacking or whatever, I don't know. But as far as I know, it isn't. So in other words, if you buy this wagon for £40, you're stuck with whatever sounds Hornby have stuck onto that. And that's a little bit limiting, isn't it? And not to mention, you're stuck with the wagon too. So if, for example, this wagon doesn't necessarily fit the layout that you're on, and certainly if the sounds that are on it don't suit the environment. Obviously, I'm assuming they're going to be putting quite a range of different sounds on these wagons so that most people will be satisfied. But certainly, it's not going to be appropriate for everybody. And obviously, the model railways hobby in itself is very, very niche. It seems to me that it's a bit of a strange thing for Hornby to do, to then divide it further by making a very specific product for a very specific purpose, which actually doesn't do it all that well. So what I'm trying to say then, probably not very clearly, is that it seems to me that there are better ways to do ambient sound effects. Okay, there probably isn't a better way to do coupling clanks and whatever from an actual piece of rolling stock, but if it's ambient audio you want, then surely there are better ways to do it. There are buildings on most layouts are on a baseboard, not mine obviously, I'm the odd one out there, but you could mount speakers almost anywhere, and in fact my layout has speakers hidden inside it too. Buildings underneath the baseboard, the possibilities are endless. Inside hills, that's where mine are. You could mount much larger speakers inside there, right? And the advantage there is you can choose your speaker, so if you want a good quality speaker, you can do that. Also, if you've got your own sound system, you can play pretty much what you like through it, so you know, you could even record your own sounds, not to mention the library of sound effects that are available online. You wouldn't just be limited to the speaker in the TTS wagon, and you wouldn't just be limited to the sound effects on that TTS decoder. So really what I'm trying to say is that locomotives, for example, really play to the strengths of TTS Sound. You've got dedicated sound effects for that locomotive which are synchronized to its motion, and it's not something you can produce at home. I don't think ambient sound is really playing to TTS Sound's strengths. It doesn't have to be synchronized to the movement of the wagon or anything like that. It can be done at home. Now here are a few options, right? So computer speakers, first of all. You can buy a set of computer speakers for less than £10, and even if you buy the cheapest you can find, the likelihood is that the sound quality through them is going to be better than on the TTS wagon. Obviously can't say that for sure yet because it hasn't been released, but that is the likelihood. It doesn't take a lot of money these days to get decent speakers, but even better than just cheap computer speakers playing through your phone or whatever. I came up with something, right? So on eBay you can buy a magnitude of cheap Bluetooth speakers. Both of these cost me less than £10. This one is the Devoom, I don't even know what this one is. It's a Bluetooth speaker. Sound quality from it is absolutely amazing. It cost me, I think, 10 quid, something like that. This one was £8, I think. It's the SoundLink Mini. It's just a generic Chinese one, but again, the sound quality from this is incredible. Now, I'm not suggesting here that something like this is going to fit inside a Hornby wagon, or even something like this, right? That's ridiculous. But all I'm trying to say with this is that the technology is there, and it's affordable, right? And believe me, the circuitry inside these is small enough to fit inside something like this. Certainly a building or a hill or something like that, and you know, for the same price as one of these TTS wagons, you could buy 4 of these, or you know, 3 of these, something like that. So here's what I'd do if I were Hornby. I would invest in some kind of technology like this, and obviously those cheap Chinese ones aren't going to be patented, and they've probably been stolen from somebody else in the first place. So even if push came to shove, Hornby could probably just buy those, take the circuitry out of them and use it. So what Hornby could really do is they could sell this circuitry and the speakers and things as a kit. They could even package it inside rolling stock if they wanted to. They could package it inside buildings or other bits of scenery, anything like that, so that people could buy it, and then it's kind of over to you. Presumably Hornby would want to produce an iPhone app or something like that, a bit like a soundboard which has the range of samples that they've already got, for instance, that it could play through their phone or whatever via Bluetooth to the sound system, and then you've got, you know, you could fit your own speakers to it, you can choose what you play through it, and it's infinitely more customizable. What Hornby has always been about is giving, you know, modelers the tools to create something, whereas this model is very rigid. It's this specific wagon with those specific sounds on it. It's very much not customizable. If you were to, you know, use a technology like Bluetooth, which is ubiquitous, I mean, everybody's got a mobile phone. Even the oldest people in this hobby have got phones, or at the very least a laptop or a computer or a tablet which has got Bluetooth enabled. Everybody's got access to that technology, and those who don't are very much in the minority, right? So yeah, it's 2018. It just seems that a limited set of sound effects crammed into a little wagon like this is very cool, don't get me wrong, it's an awesome idea, but it's quite limiting, and when it comes to actually being used in a practical way, I think there's just much better technology out there which costs a fiver, well, £10 to £15 of this, or £8, and believe me, the sound quality from Bluetooth speakers is fantastic. And if you just made it more customizable, this is me talking to Hornby here, this is a bit weird, if it was just a little bit more customizable, if it gave people the option to play their own sounds through it, it would be a massive advantage, I think. So really, okay, if they really wanted to create a TTS wagon, in my opinion they should scrap the ambient sounds, because it doesn't make sense. The quality's not going to be very good, and it's going to be weird having it sound like there's a whole crowd of people, a horse and a workshop inside there, all very, very busy. It won't sound right, and especially if you want to run it around your layout. I understand that obviously that isn't what the people at Hornby have in mind, but that's what's going to happen with it. That's what people are going to do, and that's what people are going to think when they see this release, and they're going to think, hang on, that doesn't make sense. If you want to make wagon noises with it, that's fine, but that should be all. If you really wanted to do the thing properly, it should be some kind of wireless transmission system. Bluetooth is cheap, believe me, it's extremely cheap. Like I said, £5 on eBay. I've seen a cheap Bluetooth speaker. I'll even put a link in the description for you. So there you go, that's my thoughts on it really. Obviously Hornby are in a lot of trouble, and like I say, it would be dangerous for them to drop the ball with something like this. So no doubt they're going to carry on and produce this wagon as it is, but you know, there are better things to do in this day and age, and they could make it a much more customizable device. Certainly for the 40 quid price tag, you know, you could get some really, really good tech inside there, which would be more useful. You know, hell, you could play music through it. Imagine the novelty of that. So that's my thoughts. It's not a bad idea, like I said, I'd probably buy one, regardless of what they do with it. But to me, having ambient sounds coming through it doesn't make a lot of sense, and unfortunately it looks like that is the focus. There's no reason why you can't conceal speakers somewhere else, and even if you do want to conceal them inside a wagon, I think Bluetooth or wireless or anything like that is a better way to do it. And certainly the speakers hidden on my layout do a really good job of ambience, or I sometimes put announcements through it or something like that. Anyway, I'm just rambling now. Hopefully I've made my point. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Send this to Hornby if you like, but obviously bear in mind that this is a product that hasn't been released yet. It hasn't even been completed in the design process as far as I know. So let's not give Hornby any stick for this. Well, let's not ever give Hornby stick. It should always be constructive, of course. But let's not judge it until it's been finalised. But hopefully I've made this video in time so that if anybody does want to listen to me, and let's be honest, I don't really know what I'm talking about here. Like I say, I'm not on the inside of their business. I don't really know, you know, what it is they're trying to do with this. But as a customer, to me, those are my thoughts. And you know, you can listen to them if you like. If you don't, you don't. That's all right, no problem. But that's my thoughts on it. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this idea of just me doing a bit of this, then fine, I'll do more of it. If you'd rather me just run trains and keep my mouth shut, then that's fine. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Cheers, everybody.